It's a planned demolition. If you have one central authority, which basically do with the Federal Reserve System, and almost all banks are member banks, and they say, well, we don't need these banks, or these banks that failed or are not capitalized enough, and they merge, two medium-sized banks and a bigger bank. It's all about control. It's about control of the money. And if you have fewer banks to control, it's easier. And so that really is part of the goal, rather than, it's a failure. No, it's actually part of the plan.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 29th through May 6, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we featured 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine, and we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, backdated 1/10-ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. I'm your host, Dunnigan Kaiser, and I'm glad to welcome a returning guest who goes way back to the beginning of our channel. David Morgan, also known as the Silver Guru, the author of The Silver Manifesto, joins us this Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. David, as always, thank you for joining us on Liberty and Finance.
It's been a while. It's good to be back. Good to see you, Kaiser.
It was great to see you in person at the first Liberty Mastermind Symposium in Dallas, Texas. And we've had we knew each other at that time, and we've known each other even better since. And a lot of our viewers have followed your insights into understanding the behind the veil, why silver is the most undervalued commodity and asset, and one that's likely to outperform in the future. One that's seen quite a bit of life, actually, in the past couple of years here, as the dollar has been going down the drain faster than usual. You've written recently about and spoken about the new monetary system. It's remarkable, and I have a quote I should probably pull up. Maybe I'll paraphrase it when it comes to it, but about misunderstandings in our current world about the existing monetary system, how people think it's been around forever. It has not. People think it's based on the Constitution. It is not. People think it represents truth and actually is money. It's not. So you gave a speech at the New Orleans Investment Conference, I understand, on the new monetary system. Can you enlighten us about that? And I'll chime in with a couple of tidbits along the way.
Absolutely. So first I want to put on my engineering hat for a moment and build the foundation. So one of the best foundations I think ever made was by the first movie Thrive by Foster Gamble. And he does a pyramid of power. And in the pyramid of power, what you see is that, living life forms like the animals and the plants, trees and all that are underneath the pyramid. And we, the people, are there. And the bottom of the pyramid is government. And then above government, you start to have corporations. So corporations are superior to the government in the chain of power. And then above the corporations, you have commercial banks. And then from commercial banks, you go to the money center banks. And the money center banks, you eventually get to the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. And now you've moved pretty far up the pyramid. And then you get to the all-seeing eye, and you can argue, well, is it the Jesuits? Is it a foreign life form? I won't go there because I don't know. I've got ideas. So the Bankers Bank is called the Bank of International Settlements. So I did my speech in New Orleans at the 50th Anniversary Gold Show. I talked about the monetary system from where it would emanate from, and it's not from the Federal Reserve. It's from the Bank of International Settlements. And so I went basically using almost everything off of their website. So it could be verified that they basically want a cashless society based on a digital currency of some type that would clear through, and you can look this up, ISO 222. And this is where I have a bit of a pushback with my friend Andy Schechtman, and I'm not against Andy, but I think, in my opinion, studied opinion, and he makes a pretty good case about the BRICS being like a counterweight to the current system. And in a way they are. But when you get to the way the world really works, or at least how I viewed it and studied for years, it all goes through the elite banking system. And it all clears through the same thing. So the BRICS have to clear through ISO 222, and so does any other digital currency or any other final payment method, be it a SWIFT system, the Chinese system, a digital currency, or what have you. So that, to me, spells it out. I like to go to, follow the money, you follow it all the way up. That's where it emanates from. So that's it in a nutshell. You can go to their website. I think Brian put my speech up for public access. I don't have it memorized to go through it all, but, we want the bottom line. That's the bottom line. They're still in control. And I think on the Fed, I know we want to talk about that more, and people think, that some people still think that it's part of the U.S. government. And, I have to go to G. Edward Griffin and the creature from Jekyll Island. I mean, he now states, or has for a long time, that it's quasi-government. It is a private corporation. But the way it's been modified over the years is that the member banks are part of the Fed. So they are, corporations that are, let's say, their articles of incorporation come from the state of Delaware for the most part, or New York, or what have you. So it's a very complex system, but it's a hierarchy system that's a top-down system. And I think I want to emphasize that people think that the government has all this power and that Mr. So-and-so or Mr. whomever is going to, make things great and they're going to do all this. And they attribute really more power to them than they actually have or deserve, because the lobbyists in Washington District of Criminals are extremely efficient at getting the laws in their direction to do what they want. And the, let's say the bought and paid for Congress critters and senators do what they are paid to do. And that comes through the corporate class. And nothing happens in a corporation unless you can be heavily involved in the credit system, and that comes to the banking class. So let's just get this straight once and for all. Who's really running things is not the government. They're taking orders from corporations for the most part, and corporations are taking orders from the banks for the most part. So, I'm getting a little more gnarly in my older age because, I have a lot of time left. It's not me personally what my lifespan is. We're near the hour of midnight right now. And if we don't wake up enough people that will say, I'm not complying, just say no. Easier said than done. We may be going down that road to serfdom that nobody really wants. I mean, it might sound good that you get free everything. But remember, if you want free healthcare and free dental and the bed that you're guaranteed to sleep in and free entertainment, you can have that anytime you want. It's called jail.
You mentioned along the way the new monetary system and the BIS. I wanted to pick your brain a bit farther about that because, as you mentioned, we've seen no end of restrictions placed on people's lives just over the last 4 years if they didn't comply with edicts that seem to come down from local authorities at the county and state level, but then they always referred upstream. They said, well, actually, we're just following national guidelines from this or that government agency. And then the buck got passed farther. The government agencies were saying, well, actually, we're just following guidelines from the global, the World Health Organization or whatever. And so it becomes more and more anonymous, more and more absolutely vague and clouded and shrouded in mystery as who these string pullers are that we're all bowing down to, and they can lock down most of the entire world at the same time, make people lose their jobs, make people not be able to travel, people not be able to graduate, all kinds of things. Our lives basically came to a screeching halt, fractured supply chains around the world, all because of some dubious and shrouded figures up at some unknown global level. So I wanted to talk to you about this phenomenon. If the Fed has been pulling the strings as the bankers' bank of the country for the last numerous decades, but now there's a global entity that's really behind that and really the ones calling the shots going forward, then are these kinds of lockdowns and authoritarian interventions in our lives, our channel, liberty and finance, those who would deny us liberty in the name of financial safety or whatever they claim, is this now going to be bumped up to the global level to where we have to comply with global currency restrictions on a global level in order to have any kind of ability to live our lives?
Yeah, it's structured that way. And again, it's sort of hidden, like you say, unless you push back. Well, we're just following orders from, the next level above us. And you say, well, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're just following orders from the next level above us. I did leave out a critical part of the speech, and that is how much the new artificial intelligence will be engaged in the monetary system. And this will not only be in the monetary system, will be pervasive throughout our lives. So if you do something that isn't copacetic with your financial wherewithal, the AI might pick that up. And because of that impropriety, you will be doxxed of your, some money. You might be blocked from a transaction. And then your carbon footprint will fit into this as well, that, you drove too many times to grandma's this month. Therefore, your fuel allotment is going to be cut by, 20%. You ate too much, whatever. And, it's just going to go on and on. So when you give this power control, and then again, to emphasize the AI, this is an algorithm that will not have any compassion involved. So, a judge has the ability as a human being to look at the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, and maybe there's something about the particular case-by-case basis that the judge maybe is a bit more lenient because it really deserves that because of insinuating circumstances or whatever. AI doesn't have that ability. AI is going to say, you were going 23 miles per hour over, therefore the fine is this or whatever, let alone you were, going faster so you didn't hit the buffalo or something. I don't know, but you get the idea. And this will work its way through everything. There'll be a lot less, the idea of a RoboCop out there at some point in time is closer than most people think. So I wanted to fit that in because that was part of the speech, and I gave some, examples. So this one I just dreamed up wasn't maybe the best, but you get the idea. And this is frightening because there isn't any recourse. I'm not sure that you'll even have the ability to go through, let's say, a process where you could push back and get a hearing on the case or whatever. If the AI decides it this way, what do you do? Go to a higher AI? I don't know. But it's frightening when you think about it. And that's my last and final point before I give it back. And that is, we're not moving into a communist system. We're moving into a technocracy. And a technocracy really removes a lot of the political class. A lot of the political class at that bottom of the pyramid, remember, anything that's that low is kind of more expendable. The corporate class is above the governing class. Well, the governing class could get down to fewer people and more AI, more computers, more RoboCops. They are not, that class isn't needed as much as it is in today's world. So lots of things go into the very, very quickly changing world with, what's going on with Doge and everything else we see. But at the heart of it, it's control. And there's nothing that controls a human being more in our current system than the monetary system.
You mentioned also this hierarchy where the BIS is above the Fed. The Fed is mysterious enough in terms of where they derive their power, who they really serve. We keep hearing that they have this dual mandate of trying to get full employment and stable prices. However, it's often seen that the actions taken by the Fed serve the bankers. There was that country song that came out after the global financial collapse saying, "I need a bailout," from ordinary moms and pops that felt like they got passed over where the bankers got saved. So it seems it's not so much the people's bank as it's the bankers' bank, and it's out for its own. I mean, you look at the members of the Fed, they are bankers making decisions on behalf of saving the system. The system is what's not expendable. It's the people underneath it, the ordinary people that are expendable. We'll talk for a little bit later about whether the system itself is under controlled demolition and is expendable only to be replaced by one that's even more authoritarian. But right now, on this notion of the Fed being having a mandate and serving it for the good of the people or the good of the economy. It seems to be just a sort of like operating under the color of law or under the color of good intentions, but not really. There was a rather revealing testimony by Judy Shelton, former advisor in President Trump's first term, talking about Janet Yellen and others on the Fed and the Treasury and so on, all talking together about what constitutes meeting the mandate of stable prices. And she advocated, unlike Alan Greenspan, who advocated for 0% inflation as a target, which would mean stable prices, that no, a stable rate of inflation, in other words, a stable rate of destruction of the currency, would be stable enough that it would be preferable to most people because it looks like their wages are going up, et cetera, rather than actually maintaining the worth, the value of their currency as money, as a store of value, which it is not. So what are your thoughts on the Fed as the banker's bank, really seeking to preserve itself and the system and the banks rather than the good of the people?
Well, there's no question that the Fed's real purpose is to save the banking system. And to save the banking system, they'll do whatever they have to. I mean, if you go back to the financial crisis of 2008, the Fed gave out a lot of funds to European banks that were having issues. And I think the congressman from Florida, I forget his name, but he's really putting I think it was Bernanke, he's putting one of the Fed members on the hot seat and asking him how much, money was given, and he refused to answer the amount. He didn't remember the amount. Didn't matter the amount. They're not answerable to Congress. They're not answerable to anybody. They're above. They are a separate private corporation. As they're now their mandate, I have to laugh because one of the first publications I did on the internet so many years ago, 25 or thereabouts, I talked about their mandate to keep stability in the monetary system. And at that time, I said that the $1913, remember this 25 years ago or thereabouts, that the $1913 worth 3 cents. Great job, gentlemen. Because their mandate was to keep a stable dollar, then a $1913 would be the same exact value in 2000 than it is in 1913. And yet here it was, worth 3% of what it was originally. I mean, if you do a 10-point quiz, you're doing a spelling bee and you're a third grader and you bring your paper home to your parents, it says 3 out of 100. I mean, you would consider that to be a miserable failure. And yet here we are saying, the dollar's stronger than everybody else. Well, relative, all things being relative, it is.
Let me interject. It would be a miserable failure if that were your actual goal. If your actual goal were to steal the people, to rob the people blind of their earnings, their savings, and their retirements while lying in their face, you could get an A+ for that if that's been pulled off.
No, I'm done, and thank you for that. Well said.
Now, you've also talked about that if the Fed seems to have been acting to not preserve the dollar and not to protect the people, but to preserve the banking system, then why are we seeing so much strain in the banking system right now? Why are we seeing so much obvious destruction of the dollar to where everybody's talking about it? There's still a lot of finger pointing going on that's completely worthless in terms of, it's just corporate greed or it's shrinkflation or it's this or that or the other, rather than pointing to the root of the problem, the evil that's driving this generational theft from ordinary workers and earners and this class struggle that looks like an extinction event for the middle class. I mean, we interviewed the author of The Murder of the Middle Class not that long ago. So this is a real thing that's happening to people. It's affecting their ability to have two parents in the household or a parent home with the children, et cetera. And that affects generational attachment, et cetera. Just on and on. The effects are just pervasive and serious of destruction of people's savings and earnings. What about this, what appears to be perhaps even an intentional controlled demolition of the current financial system? Is that just to usher in the next one that's of greater control?
That is my take. I mean, it's like, the system is failing or the dollar's going to fail. It's a planned demolition. The situation is that it's easier to have a central authority. So if you've got, I don't know what the number of banks in the country is right now, but if it's X and you cut that into half and then you cut that in half again, your management system is a lot more clear. I mean, if you have one central authority, which basically do with the Federal Reserve System, and almost all banks are member banks, and they say, well, we don't need these banks, or these banks have failed or they're not capitalizing enough, and they merge, two medium-sized banks and a bigger bank. It's all about control. It's about control of the money. And if you have fewer banks to control, it's easier. And so that really is part of the goal, rather than, it's a failure. No, it's actually part of the plan. And then, of course, you move into what we talked about earlier, into making it eventually a one world currency. Now, the BIS doesn't really say that in their documentation, but they imply that all currencies will clear through this one system. And then you can just imagine, for less friction or whatever, rather than have different currencies, why not just have one world currency? Now, that's my take on what they wrote. And I think that part of what's going on right now is to get the system in such a point where, as so many of your guests and myself included have used the overused word reset, but the idea being that the system is failing. Most people know it's failing. Mathematically, it has to fail. But failure means what? The bankers' minds, as long as they keep control of the monetary system, and out of the ashes comes the phoenix, and we go from, paper dollars into a already digital system, but it's revamped to where there is no currency. You have a universal basic income. All the money at source is traced and taxed at point of sale. No IRS necessary. Everything that you buy is already taxed at point of sale. And there would be, let's say, a luxury tax if you're buying an automobile that was less efficient than the standard set out by, let's say, the treaty from the United Nations. Let's get down to business here. It's not going to be a mandate from a given state that says we want this kind of mileage. They might say it, but it's going to be superseded by the federal government. It's going to be superseded by some treaty that's going to go to the UN. It's quite obvious if you look at this stuff carefully, and I do, but not to the extent that some of my friends do, because I focus more on the financial side and you can't know everything. But there are others that, go to the UN meetings. I'm losing his name. You can write something for the New American, or
Alex Newman.
And that guy is like on it. And he knows a lot more about that than I, but I listen to him quite frequently. And this is the way it really works. But people are thinking, well, this certain person that's on the red team is going to fix things. It's not the way it really works. It's sort of an illusion. And I'm not anti anyone. I'm pro freedom. That's who I am. My bad day, I was asked a long time ago, I'm digressing a moment, I'll give it back, but it was a Corlin's economics report. And Al loved to get into politics, and I just dislike it. And so he, of course, put me on the spot on the show. It's a live show. I can't back out. And he says, all right, Morgan, what do you think? What do you want? Who do you want in there? And I said, you know what I want? I don't care what color they are. I don't care what their background is. I want one thing and one thing only. I want every one of them to do what they say they're going to do. And that's when they swear the oath of office. I want them to uphold that oath. That's what I want. Al was lost for words for about a minute or two.
Yeah, so this circles back to an example. One of the things that the oath is uphold the Constitution of the United States, hold and defend, right, against threats, foreign and domestic. And so, and foreign, I guess, counts on global as well. So in the Constitution and in the 1792 Coinage Act and lots of other, we got the Bland-Allison Act of 1878 and on, is reaffirming that for the good of we the people, gold and silver are the money of the country of the United States of America, period, end of story. And yet, here we are since 1913 with fiat currency, and since 1964 when the silver was pulled out of the coinage, and 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window, et cetera, that gold and silver have been basically surgically removed from people's understanding of the money of our country and how they are coupled to freedom and to the ability of people to keep their earnings and their savings, et cetera. And so we've been expressing quite a bit recently on our show that we can work through this medium of trying to get the message out one person at a time, watching individual podcasts and getting light bulbs to go on in their head and connect that their freedom and the good of their family's future and that of their children and their grandchildren not being crushed under an unending burden of unpayable debt and servitude to unseen masters above them and now at the global level is tied to honest money and sound money. And that's something that you've beat the drum for a long time. And yet, so we thought, well, we can do that one person at a time, but we also need to reach the shepherds of funds who are doing it on behalf of others, such as insurance companies, endowment managers, HOA treasury managers, et cetera. So I reached out to a local HOA magazine that goes out to all the treasury managers of HOAs, that sort of thing in our state. And I pitched, hey, how about I write you an article about the threats to the future viability of homeowners association treasuries that are posed by the volatility and destruction of value in the current monetary system. And for example, in contrast to traditional sound money, gold, and that all the countries that are going that direction in the world and not the US, et cetera. And what I got back was a quote directly from an attorney saying, well, according to Florida state law, homeowners associations are bound, they're duty bound to do prudent and responsible investing. And gold is a speculative, volatile asset that does not pay a yield. Therefore, it does not meet the criteria of sound investing. And I thought, how did we get from just in a couple generations from the Constitution and all of our reaffirming documents along the way through the centuries saying that gold and silver are money and everything else is just, it's a ghost of money, et cetera, and allowing control over us to the point where it's all inverted now. And the official law documents are stated to say that it's excluded and you have to be in the system. And you're saying, no, folks, that's just about to amp up to a whole new level of 4D chess here once we go global, once we go AI, once we go all in digital. There's no way to even take a withdrawal from the bank, et cetera. Can you address that phenomenon of gold being systematically excluded from the official arena in direct contradiction to the Constitution?
Well, I will. I want to tell you a quick story. First of all, I'm going to be speaking at the Money Show in Las Vegas this year in July. And I was at the Money Show several years ago, and one of the top guys of the certified financial planners, I call it association, I don't know the exact term, was there. And so I spoke with him, off the record, walking down the hall, about the Ibbotson study, the Harvard study, the CPM study, and why gold is a part of a balanced portfolio and absolutely critical for all weather conditions, all economic, financial conditions. And, it's an adult conversation. And I basically said, why are, all the certified financial planners never, ever mention gold? And that these studies prove that you need it for a balanced portfolio. And he was squirming, but, basically gave a similar answer to what you just said. And then I said, well, what happens if my, ilk is correct and there is a huge financial correction or a big crash in the market and people wake up to the fact that they should have been protected by a 15% weighting in gold and the lawsuits start coming. And I did it deliberately. Now, this was a one-on-one conversation. I wasn't trying to bully him. I was just trying to, push him, and he just basically shrugged it off. I forget his exact comment. He turned his back on me and walked away. But, my idea was to enlighten the CFAs, the certified financial analysts, certified financial planners, to put it. Now, your question goes deeper than that. And it comes into legal tender laws, court cases that have been basically, in my opinion, very studied opinion, basically did not obey the law. And, when the first case came out that the Legal Tender Act, that paper is the fundamental foundation when it clearly says in the Constitution, which is the law of the land, it's above everything. It's not color of law. It's not a mandate. It's not an opinion. It is. It doesn't really need to be questioned. So the court gooned it. But who's running the courts? Well, I don't know. But you might use some logic here and say, well, maybe the bankers have some influence in how that ruling took place. And once a precedent is set, and this is an unfortunate part about jurisprudence in our country, is once a precedent is set, it kind of like leans from that point forward into any other cases. Well, the precedent was set that a piece of paper is legal tender and it has to be accepted. I'm going to digress one more because it's one of my favorite, gotchas. I've often thought when I get my, property tax bill to call up the county assessor and say, I'm really confused. I am very, very sorry. I think I've been frauding you for the last 10 years. Why? Well, I've been paying my property taxes with this script from a private entity. And it says right here that states only accept gold and silver in the payment of debt. And as far as I understand, my property tax is a debt. Is that correct? Well, yeah. Well, I haven't been paying you with gold and silver. Am I in trouble? Am I going to go to jail? Now, obviously, I'm being a bit facetious here, but if you go to the letter of the law, and the law was upheld instead of twisted, excuse me, then I think we'd have a different, we'd be talking a different subject today. But unfortunately, the further it gets corrupt, and this is something that, is in the film, The Four Horsemen, and, and other places, and most of your guests, this is a cyclical thing. This is not like, it's, from 1964 or 5 on when the silver, was out of the system. If you go to the book by Bastier, The Law, and it's a very thin book, but it's a very powerful book about how the ruling class basically manipulates the law to get things set up to where they have an advantage over the regular people. And I want to go one more place, and that's on, silver as money. And if you look at silver as money, you don't have to go that far back in history where $1 a day was an average wage. So $1, which is 371.2 fine grains and 999 fine silver, is not 1 ounce of silver. But if you get a silver eagle, it is 1 ounce, and it will say $1 on it, which proves the Treasury doesn't know the weight of $1. $1 at law is about 3/4 of an ounce. But for simplicity purposes, I'm going to call it 1 ounce. But I just don't want people to know, David's a silver guru and he doesn't know what he's talking about. So if you go to $1 a day, and that was an average wage. If you go today and you Google, and I was really surprised at this, Dunnigan, but the average wage, believe it or not, according to Google, is like $25 an hour, which sounds high at an 8-hour day. So that's $200 for an average person per day. So that would mean that 1 ounce or that 3/4 of an ounce would be worth $200. And I think that's about the right price in order to use it as money again. Because silver is so undervalued. It's been pushed down and kept down for so long, and it's worth so much more. It has to be revalued to use it as money. But you could look at it and flip to the other side of the coin and say, wait a minute, I'm getting paid 8 times more than I should if I take my value in silver. And if it corrects even halfway or a third of the way, I'll have, recognizable gain. But it's an easier way to look at, what should silver be priced at? If you want to price it as far as a day's wage, that's why. Now, if you go to Chris Duane, Silver Shield guy, he'll tell you that in Roman times, 1/10 of an ounce of silver is what a soldier was paid. So you could take that number and you could factor it by 10. I think more recent history is more important than ancient history. That's the way all the algorithms are set up. You want to know what a stock's performance was last, 3 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, was weighted far more in the algorithm than what the stock did 2 years ago. But nonetheless, I wanted to bring that forth.
Earlier, you were mentioning about government being just sort of middle management in the pyramid hierarchy of power. We've certainly seen that play out. The ugly hand has been revealed in many of our lives over the past 4 years, to where the rules all got broken. There's rules about you can't force people to take an experimental medical submit to an experimental medical treatment without informed consent. That was after World War II and the horrific things that went on in prisoner war camps in World War II, et cetera, or in concentration camps. And they said, never again, we're going to let that happen. Except now it's for everybody. And things like that demonstrate where big ag or big pharma or whatever have captured supposedly the portions of the government that are supposed to be regulating them, the revolving door of personnel between the two, et cetera, to where the policies get set. And just as we just talked about denying the people of sound money by taking silver or gold away from them and marginalizing it, does that sound familiar to some things that happened in the past 4 years about life-saving treatments that were denied and taken away from people, or, early interventions, and said, no, you're just going to go down this official protocol, which is basically stay at home and get sicker until your emergency case, et cetera, and then bad things happen. So as you said, the horrific impacts on people's lives could result in, and perhaps should result in, liability lawsuits of magnitude, saying, look, you caused harm, you knew better, and yet you intentionally prevented people from getting the lifeboat that they needed, and said, nope, lifeboats are bad for you. You need to stay on the Titanic over here. That's where you want to be. That's right. In terms of current personal financial advisors, restrictions and laws are being placed on the shepherds of funds of large institutions. What do you believe? Do you believe that the sound money movement started with like 9 states and 14 states, 23 states? They keep on piling on that are sharing and networking at the grassroots level, making legal tender laws, setting up state depositories, exempting bullion from gold and silver from sales tax. Perhaps they'll be doing it from capital gains tax at the state level, et cetera, making sure that taxes are payable in metals at the state level, et cetera. Do you believe that movement is going to be striking at the heart of this problem that's being officially foisted on ordinary people otherwise for their financial lives?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go to first principles and you look at it from the aspect of the same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. So any American was treated equally. When I say created equal, it isn't that we're created equal in our ability to carry a football or to run a race. It's under the law. We're all created equal. So no one is above anyone else. So let's say a pharmaceutical company could not be exempted. That's changing the rules. So that's the first principles, which have been broken. And then on the sound money, I mean, it comes back to fairness to everyone involved and the inability to basically change the value over the long term. I mean, it can fluctuate. And the worst thing about the honest money system was pegging silver to gold at a fixed ratio. The best thing you can do is to let them float. And then silver could be exchanged for gold and vice versa at different rates as the market determined. And that would keep a balance in the system rather than getting a push into one or the other, an arbitrage situation. But the first principles are that same rules, laws, and accountability for everyone. If everyone's accountable for the same monetary unit, and it does take work for it to be manufactured. I mean, to come up out of the ground, to be purified, to refine it, and to press it into a coin, then you have something of value. And if you look at it from a gold-silver aspect, which obviously I have many times, gold really serves a purpose as money or jewelry. But silver now, in the technological age, has a absolute essential quality that all of the metals don't have to the level that silver has. It's the best conductor of electricity. It's the best conductor of heat. Its acoustical properties are superior to most metals. And these properties are essential in high-tech society. So you couldn't have today's world without silver. You could have today's world without gold. So there's something to the silver equation that maybe the bankers saw a long time ago, that this must be demonetized because we need it for industry, and therefore we need to make sure that we manage it in a way that's sufficient to our needs. Remember, going up the ladder, corporations are above the political scene. Well, let's get the politicians to make it the way we want it, take it out of the monetary system. We need it for industry. We're a big corporation, and we rely on silver to become necessary for our bottom line, and we want a huge profit. So let's keep that element on the periodic table out of the monetary sphere and into the industrial use only. And there are people in our group, in our peer group, that will, argue that silver isn't money. Economically, silver is not money. But at law, I still could, go into court and win the case that silver's money. I mean, I could go in with silver dollars and be stupid to do it. But I could go into Walmart with silver dollars and buy something. I'd have to argue maybe with the manager, but they'd have to accept it if they knew what the hell they're doing. They might push back and say, we can't accept it. So you won't take money, but you'll take this green stuff by a private corp, huh? Oh, yeah. Oh, of course we will. It's really sad. It's sad that not enough of us have stood up. Going back to the medical thing, this is where it really gets tough for freedom not being free. And that is where you do have a choice, but not much of one. You can stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do it, and lose your job. I happen to have a good friend in Canada that did that. And he's never got back to the same job he had before. And, to go through the court system and try to rectify a wrong, it may happen, it may not. But, it's very difficult. It's easy to say, oh, I'll just say no or no. And you might know better. I don't want it, but if I don't do it, I can't feed my family. I mean, this is a big fear that people have, and it's a justified one. Anyway, I digress. I just wanted to make that point because it's going to take sacrifice if we are going to make this thing turn around. It's not going to be like, you just check a ballot box and everything's going to get better. Grow up. Cavalry is not coming to our rescue.
You mentioned earlier with me that Catherine Austin Fitts has been advocating for a long time about waking people up to this global oppression. She also has advocated people try their very best to pay everything in cash that they can and not use digital transactions to pay for things because it's one step farther down that road to totalitarianism. But even now we're being told no cash, no cash, no cash. A family-owned hotel chain that we love for many reasons, Drury and cashless check-in, on and on it goes. Places that won't accept cash. It says right on the piece of paper, it says good for all debts, public and private. So, I mean, it's almost like a prisoner in the prison saying, hey, you're taking away our gruel and mashed potatoes. To try to take that to be the rock you're going to defend and stand on is the ability to use paper cash. But what about that? If this new system is going to be all encompassing and taking away the last privacy and the last freedoms that people may be enjoying in what's left of the shreds of the middle class and the working class before they get completely supplanted with AI and serfdom, is it worth fighting for the right to use cash, or should we be fighting a deeper fight of getting rid of the jailers, tearing down the jail and restoring our ability to use God's true money as how we live our lives and how we save our savings, et cetera?
Well, first of all, I was taught by a pretty well-known in the local area legal authority, and he said, taught me to choose your battles. My battle is sound money. I'm not Alex Newman. I don't pretend to be. I'm grateful that I have him as a friend, and I can rely on all the work he's done and get kind of a good briefing from him whenever. But my battle so I think if that's my battle, then every opportunity that arises, I should take advantage of it. So Starbucks won't take cash. So I will, as an example, I don't know if it does or it doesn't, but if you're in a situation like that, then you don't have to yell, but you might have 3 or 4 people in line behind you. And you say, your coffee's, $5. So you give them a $5 bill and, we can't take cash. And then you just calmly pick it up and say, well, this does say for all debts, public and private, if you won't accept it, does that mean I get this coffee for free? You just engage it. Well, no, you have to use a credit card. Well, I don't qualify for credit. I was bankrupt last year and I can't get credit for another year, but I want this cup of coffee and I'm willing to pay for it. And you hand it over to them. Well, I can't do it. Well, can I talk to the manager? So now you're backing up their business. Everybody behind you is hearing it. You're not causing a scene. You're asking questions. The best way to put the wheelbarrows put the rocks into their wheelbarrow is to ask questions. Don't tell them a damn thing. Just ask them questions like, well, why isn't this accepted? It says on there it's supposed to be. Well, we don't accept cash. Yeah, the clerk told me that. But my question is, why don't you accept cash when it's supposed to be payable to anybody? All debts. I mean, this is part of the all, isn't it? Well, I don't know why I'm just told that. Well, I don't have credit, So what are we going to do? What else is possible? That's a really good one. What else is possible? Now they have to think. You put them on the spot. There's 4 guys behind you. If 2 more people have come in, you're at the airport. Let me pay for your coffee or what? Who knows what's going to happen? But now, so you have at least planted a seed in maybe 3 or 4 people, or maybe somebody walking by stopped it. What's going on over there? And so I would say, if your battle is, you pick your battle, mine is sound money, then any opportunity that arises, you take advantage of it. And that's a good way to do it. I mean, you can get up. So what do? I mean, they've already made the coffee. Are they going to dump it down the sink? Maybe. Are they going to give it to somebody walking by? I don't know. Is the manager going to drink it? I don't know. But these are things that you can do. And they're opportunities to educate the public in the real world that most people are in. I don't know why I want to say this, but I was in that airport, wanted a coffee. I'd been 8-hour, back-to-back flights. And all I wanted was a quick pick-me-up. And was in Sweden. And honest to God, they should only take my card. Well, I gave my card. Well, it was declined because sometimes, international or whatever. So I had their euros.
Oh, it was an AI algorithm, Dave.
And they wouldn't give it to me. It was a card or nothing.
Sometimes it goes the opposite, where we were in our favorite breakfast spot in our previous town, and we noticed the place was packed, and yet most people weren't eating. They were just sitting, and we couldn't get in. We couldn't get sat. And we asked, what's going on? And they said, well, our credit card system is down, so nobody can leave because they can't pay. And I said, well, we've got cash. They go, oh, come on, we can work you in. If you're paying with cash, we can get you in and out. So I should have said quite loudly there, so if I can pay with cash, I get my food. Anyway, but that's standing up for paper again, not for real money. I want to plug soundmoneydefense.org. If you guys are interested in fighting the good fight that Dave is talking about, there are many organizations that are collaborating on this. The Missouri Freedom Initiative is another one. There's the 10th Amendment Center and so on. But the soundmoneydefense.org, check it out. We'll put a link in the description of the video there. They have a heat map of the country, and you can see where your state falls in the fight and keeping freedom alive for us and for our children. We had a very interesting interview last night. If you haven't seen it, everybody check it out. It was Rafi Farber talking about how the loss of sound money, the loss of ability to store our savings from our earnings for our future and our children and our grandchildren causes a loss of hope and a loss of motivation to save for the future, and it can cause depression, can cause people just to waste their money, and it can cause a real disconnect between the generations, so that the children and grandchildren know they don't have a financial future because they're not going to be able to get anything handed down because it's all being destroyed. The value is being destroyed by design. David Morgan, the Silver Guru, thank you for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance. But before we let you go, how can people follow your work on an ongoing basis and get your weekly insights?
Yeah, just go to the main site, themorganreport.com, sign up for our free newsletter. I put all the public interviews on there, and I do a weekly podcast, just myself usually. And I either go through the financial events of the week, or sometimes I dive into a certain subject. Last week, I talked about the dollar and what it's doing and what it portends for the future.
We're so grateful always for decades for your connection with our family and with our collaborative work together. Thank you for being here, David.
Well, thank you. Going back to Texas, I remember I'm always trying to give. And I remember I had those books called the Citizen's Rule Book. It's actually the Constitution. And I brought a box of those. I put them out to every place setting that was there in Texas.
Yeah, and Common Sense version 2 you handed that out as well. Very, very thoughtful, thought-provoking, and very helpful, as was your keynote address there at the conference. And so thank you for being part of that movement, trying to bring truth, justice, fairness, sanity, historically correct routing, and proper respect for God's money to the people. And thank you for being here on Liberty and Finance as part of that.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for April 29th through May 6th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we featured 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine, and we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. And finally, backdated 1/10-ounce Platinum UK Britannia are just $29 over melt per coin. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.